Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the Blue Ribbon Commission on the Future of the Bar Exam. We are going to begin the meeting by calling roll and opening the meeting. Kim, why don't we do that first?
Sure. David Boyd.
Present.
Alex Chen. Charles Duncan.
Present.
Jeremy Evans. Ryan Harrison. Tracy Montes.
Present.
Natalie Rodriguez.
Present.
Emily Scavallero.
Present.
Karen Silverman.
Present.
At the moment, we have quorum.
Fantastic. Just a quick review of the format. This is the subcommittee on exam pathway. We did break into two subcommittees, and yesterday we had a meeting of the pathway to licensure through a non-exam alternative. It was a successful meeting that was a little longer than planned, but obviously with good intention and work product that came out of it. Today's meeting is scheduled from 9 to 1. We're going to have plenty of time for comments, questions, and conversation. I'd like to start with public comment. As noted on the agenda for today's meeting, public comment during the meeting will be limited, but members of the public wishing to comment are encouraged to submit written comments prior to the meeting, and we will consider those. In addition, we will take public comment now. We ask you limit your comments to 2 minutes, and we will have public comment period for a period of 15 minutes. Kim, is there any public comment today?
At this moment, Mr. Vice Chair, I don't see any public comments.
Okay. I believe we can then move to business. Great. Amy, do you want to start?
Yes, I can do that.
Great.
All right, Devin, do you mind pulling up the PowerPoint?
Yes.
All right. So good morning, everyone. As we get started, I want to highlight the guiding questions that we had. If we go to the next slide, please. So as we started and embarked on this, on our subcommittee at the exam pathway, these are some of the questions that guided the work and the presentations that we put together. So they included, what should the exam look like in order to achieve our mission? What does the demonstration of minimum competence look like? And we presented and discussed the California practice analysis, the knowledge, skills, and abilities, as well as the NCBE recommendation. I don't know what that background noise is. Also, we had a presentation on the tenets for building a better bar exam. Some of the other questions include access and fairness considerations and their implications as measured by cost, exam delivery, modality and format, exam content, and disparate performance. Next slide, please. Importantly, as part of this consideration is, how do our recommendations protect the public? How do our recommendations ensure minimum competence in professional ethics and responsibility? How do our recommendations address reciprocity and portability? Are our recommendations mutually exclusive of the other pathway? And do the considerations lead toward a UBE or California specific exam? And the goal is to get to those questions today. So the next slide. So the first thing, I'm going to walk through certain areas that we've been needing to address. The first is related to reciprocity and portability, what exists today and potentially what is possible in the future. So just to note and help define the various forms of being admitted to a jurisdiction, aside from being admitted by taking an exam and passing that exam, you could also be admitted to other jurisdictions by a transferred UBE score, and I'll be describing that process and the requirements around that. Also being admitted by the motion, and in this format, there is no exam requirement, and that's based on two policies, reciprocity and comedy. Next slide, please. So essentially, portability is what it sounds like. It's the ability for examinees who take the exam, such as the UBE. It's the ability to earn a portable score that can be transferred to seek admission in another jurisdiction. Reciprocity is where a jurisdiction allows admissions to the state bar without requiring an examination, and where one jurisdiction permits lawyers from another jurisdiction if that new jurisdiction extends the same privilege to the lawyer coming in. Comedy is basically reciprocity without the need to extend the same privilege. So in this next slide, I'm going to describe this, unpack this for you. It's a lot of information because essentially the two concepts that are charted here are what it looks like in California, in the United States today. What is reciprocity and admission? What is that scheme? And specifically, it's the ability for already licensed attorneys to be admitted without needing to take a bar exam. So here in this map, I differentiate between jurisdictions that require that an applicant seeking admission on a motion must have received their JD from an ABA law school, and also distinguish between whether reciprocity is required or comedy is the policy in that state. So here, the red jurisdictions require that admissions on a motion applicants must have received their JD from an ABA law school, and that reciprocity is required. And as you can see here, we have about 20 jurisdictions with this policy. The blue jurisdictions also require admission on motion applicants to have their JD from an ABA law school, but reciprocity is not required. And there are about 10 jurisdictions that fall in that category. The green jurisdictions do not require that admissions on motion applicants must have received their JD from an ABA law school. So this is open to applicants from other types of accredited law schools without an exam. No reciprocity is also required. We have about 9 jurisdictions in that category. So, and all of these policies are also based on a number of years of practice as well. And I can describe that in a bit. Lastly, there are a few other categories. The purple states do not require that JD be from an ABA law school. However, they do require reciprocity, which limits California licensed attorneys from being eligible for those programs. The yellow states allow admission on motion only to ABA law school applicants, but they don't have a position on reciprocity. And the last states I want to highlight, which includes California, the orange states, do not allow admission on motion altogether. So all applicants, including licensed attorneys, must take an exam in those jurisdictions. As for the states that allow admission on motion, there are states that also require certain coursework as part of that, or specific coursework in that jurisdiction as part of the admittance. So what does all of this mean for California? If California pursues a California specific examination and admission on motion, that is the ability for a future attorney to be admitted to another jurisdiction or into our jurisdiction is of value. This requires the state to potentially adopt a reciprocity policy. And then embedded in that policy determination is the determination of whether California is willing to adopt a reciprocity policy that is limited to ABA law school graduates. And this policy is something that the Supreme Court would have to tackle. Any questions or thoughts before we move on to the next screen?
Amy, I have a question. So if we decided that we would allow for motion, admission on motion, we would say that we will do reciprocity, allow reciprocity when you say we'd have to determine whether or not we're okay with ABA reciprocity, could we say we will accept ABA or non-ABA reciprocity, and it's up to the other state to decide if they would?
Yes, all of the policies would be up to the other state, which tend to be court matters too. Each jurisdiction's court weighs in on that policy or dictates that policy.
And I guess I'm just wondering, and you may not know this, but whether or not the court or just the state bar or good practice would, there is an issue with us saying, well, that state only takes ABA approved law schools. And so the reciprocity is sort of, you know, while we would take non-ABA, they won't. So policy wise in California, we will not do that. Does that make sense? Like, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, all of that would have to be discussed and outlined, you know, strategized as to, you know, what does California want to do? Limit any reciprocity with the state that does not accept all law school types, or allow for simply ABA students admission to other reciprocity with other jurisdictions.
And then my last question is, are there other states that have non-ABA but state accredited law schools?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Amy, do you see Leah has her hand up?
Oh, hi, Leah.
Hi. So I just wanted to make sure I understand the map. So the green states currently, with our current structure, recognize all California lawyers. No reciprocity is required, and there's not a requirement that you graduated from an ABA law school, right? So today, our lawyers from California can sort of easily go into Washington, Minnesota, Wisconsin, all the green states. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And so when you talk about what might need to happen if there was a California exam, that scenario isn't so different than what we have in place today, right? Basically, what we have in place today is this map. If we wanted to expand the states that California lawyers could practice in, we would ask the court to consider reciprocity, and that would give us all of the blue state. I guess the purple states would recognize our ABA and non-ABA graduates, but reciprocity is required.
Exactly.
Okay, so I think maybe I just wanted to understand it's not really about if we were to choose a California exam versus what we have today. It basically that's this, we would find ourselves in the same situation that we are in today if we adopted a new California exam, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. But like you stated, that reciprocity would open us up to more jurisdictions. Not most, but
right.
Okay.
Amy, this is Josh. I just want to go back. That was a lot of information in the last 4 slides you went through very quickly.
Sure.
I mean, what I took from it is really a discussion of how important is reciprocity and portability for us in making the decision on what type of exam that we want. Is it a deciding factor or not? What else are you hoping to get out of those 4 slides? What was the other purpose other than that?
Reciprocity and portability have been raised here in the past, and so the idea was to present this and have everybody evaluate, whether this, as we get into the discussion of which path to take, that this is part of what needs to be considered. And let me get to the next slide too, because I think it speaks to the next, to the other aspect, which I haven't talked about, and that is score portability. Obviously, currently, California cannot participate in score portability because we are not a UBE state. As you can see here, these are the states and territories that currently allow for it, and they are UBE states. So a few things to know about score portability. Jurisdictions that allow score portability require that the applicant obviously meet the minimum pass score of that jurisdiction, but also jurisdictions have established a maximum age of transferred score. So the maximum age of a score varies anywhere between 25 months and 5 years. And the most common policy across the states is 36 months or 3 years. That is that applicants that have passed the exam in a UBE jurisdiction need to know within that time frame, that short time frame, whether they would like to transfer their score to another jurisdiction. And so while score portability is feasible, it has cost and career planning implications. People need to know relatively early. Another note that is in some jurisdictions, as I've stated earlier, applicants also have to satisfy jurisdiction-specific exam requirements. There are online courses, for example, that are required in Alabama, Arizona, and so on, just as part of the admission process under a portable score. So again, this is just to give you a sense of if score portability is of value, these are some of the factors to consider. This would be feasible, but again, the caveats to that are the score age factor and the need to adopt the NCB, the next gen exam. Oh, Emily, you have a question?
So just so I understand on portability versus reciprocity.
Mhm.
So if portability would allow a recent graduate to have a portable score that probably within the first 3 years, they'd be able to shop around and decide what state they want to be in. Reciprocity would mean most likely that we're talking that yes, they've passed an exam, but they've also practiced law for a few years. So you're probably portability for 3 years, and then after that, reciprocity. Is that kind of where is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
David, you have a question?
Yes, just to make sure that I understand. So the first slides that you showed, the admission on motion, I think I understood you to say that in every jurisdiction, or at least most everywhere, there's an experience requirement precedent to being able to be admitted by motion, right?
Yes, there is. So you have to have certain years of practice, correct?
Okay, so that's not for newly licensed lawyers, that's for experienced lawyers. In contrast to what we're seeing on the screen now, which is transferability by UBE. Now that's applicable to brand new lawyers. They once they got that UBE score, they are immediately eligible to transfer that score to any other UBE jurisdiction, right?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm. All right. Any other, oh, Karen.
Sorry, just one quick question on the prior slide.
Okay.
So when we say that ABA approved law school is required, is that on a candidate by candidate basis, or is that just a statewide requirement? Because I'm wondering if any of this changes so long as we have non-ABA law schools, or is that just per candidate? So for instance, if I'm in California and I went to an ABA accredited law school, do I have more portability and reciprocity options than if I did not? Or is it all California lawyers? Does that make sense?
No. So if you were an ABA candidate from California and you wanted to apply to other jurisdictions, you have more options given the policies in other jurisdictions than you would if you're a non-ABA JD graduate.
Right. Okay. So I just wanted to confirm that so that the changing our approach to this will make a difference one way or another, right? Because otherwise, it seems to determine a lot of the portability here is the ABA accredited law school or not, right?
Yes.
And is that impacted by the UBE versus California bar choice? Or I'm trying to figure out how that intersects then with
Yes.
this discussion.
So score portability, there, as I mentioned when I first started, there are various ways of getting admitted to another jurisdiction. There's the score portability, and so that has no implications on your when you've graduated, because that is basically taking your score, applying it to another jurisdiction, and your school of origin is not factored into that. The other way of being admitted is through admission on motion. And that is as an attorney has some practice under your belt, and that it does have implications on whether you went to an ABA or non-ABA law school for California applicants going to another jurisdiction. Okay. All right.
Amy, this is Josh. Just real quick, I think I know the answer, but I have to ask anyway. With portability and reciprocity, depending on whether the state of California decides on UBE and has the score portability, do you think that it'll affect reciprocity in any way? Or do you expect that your very colorful reciprocity map is going to stay the same no matter what?
That's hard to predict. We sent out a survey to the jurisdictions about the policies. It's clear that they would require some both negotiation and reconsideration from each of the port jurisdictions. So to me, it sounds like there's room for change, right? There's potential, but no factors that lead me to believe that this would completely change if we adopted the UBE. Oh, Tracy.
I just wanted to share, in my experience, reciprocity really, well, it often comes down to the need of that particular profession in a state. If you have a state that has a high need for a particular profession, they tend to be more open. And then obviously the consumer protection element of it. Some have states or jurisdictions have much more rigorous elements. And so it really is a jurisdiction or state by state, policy. There's so many variables. A lot of times it just comes down to, do we need more of these individuals in our state, whether it's attorneys or nurses or therapists, that often will play into those types of decisions and willingness to negotiate.
Thanks. All right. Any other questions or comments? All right, so this next slide has a lot. So I'm going to stay on this slide for some time. And so let me highlight what we're describing here. So we've talked about certain exam like features or characteristics that fall into the categories of fairness and equity issues, and also the goals of ensuring that we meet our mission of minimum competence. And so here I try to distinguish where NextGen is on some of these factors compared to what it would be like if we went with a California specific bar exam. Just to summarize some of the presentations that we've had here, as well as some of our discussion topics. So one of the guiding questions that has been directed to this subcommittee is about considerations of fairness and access in determining whether the NextGen or California specific bar exam were more appropriate. And as we've described at previous meetings, exam costs and remote administration have implications on access. And given that the Office of Admissions relies, for example, entirely on administering a bar exam, it needs to reflect in its price. So whether it's the NextGen or the California specific exam, The cost to develop the content and administration method will contribute to the cost of the exam. So we now know that a remote exam decreases administration costs because we need significantly lower number of test site locations, a reduced number of proctors. A remote exam does not altogether limit the need for test sites, because we do have applicants that are unable to secure test space for themselves, and we, as a state bar, accommodate those applicants, along with applicants that have accommodations that are not compatible with remote testing, like handwriters or applicants that need, for example, speech recognition software, things that are not technically compatible with software. So it doesn't eliminate the need for a test site, but it does reduce it. So that in itself, reductions in exam costs, such as those identified in a remote test, potentially contribute to a lowered exam cost. And the NCBE has not made a final determination on exam modality. However, they have expressed that they favor using a test center for the next gen exam because it addresses the security issues that are of concern, and they believe it provides a best testing environment for candidates. So also, they have not established exam cost, but testing centers will contribute to the price of that exam. As for California, the cost related to the exam is contingent on exam and content. We have not started embarked on investigating that, because I think initially we need to determine whether what path we want to take. But we recognize the cost savings, as I mentioned, in a remote exam in the current format of that exam. The other thing we have to explore is the content of this exam and what it should include. If the decision is to continue with the California bar exam, that is one of a future initiative that we've had to take on, is what should that exam content and format include. If that option is selected, California would have greater flexibility on exam modality, something that we don't have now. And again, I want to emphasize here that a remote exam will have will contribute to exam cost. And these issues highly correlate with access and inclusion. The other thing here is, but I also know that we have to recognize that the remote testing technology needs improvement. We need, to ensure that we have compatibility with the universe of operating systems, that it should not rely on continuous internet. It should be compatible with policies if we need them, such as open book. And so this is something that, if California continues if California chooses to continue with a California specific bar exam, and remote is a possibility, that we need to explore alternatives in that technology. Now, the state bar also, our mission includes access and fairness efforts in all aspects of our functional areas. And for admissions, we are hoping to embrace it how we do in other processes, that is, to build it in and not bolt it on. And so if you see that commitment in some of the efforts that we take on, such as the differential item functioning that I've talked about, and more recently related to the bar exam is the MILE, which stands for Mindsets in Legal Education. And I'm not sure if we've raised it here before, but this is a positive mindset intervention program that has been made available for 4 bar exams starting in July 2018. And we're doing it again for this exam for the February 2022, the upcoming exam. And it's open to all exam applicants. What it is, it's a positive mindset intervention program, and it's proven to be effective in helping applicants pass the bar exam. Some of the results note that the program increases a total bar score by approximately 24 points after you control for things like your LSAT score, your GPA, and cohort effects. The program increases bar passage primarily with first generation and underrepresented test takers, It's been proven effective on those who identify as first-generation college students and people of color. As I noted, it's boosted the number of points scored on that exam. And so, and most importantly, it helps reduce psychological friction experienced by applicants studying for the exam. So that's an initiative that we've participated in. We found value. We're going to continue providing this for the February and July bar exams. And I mentioned also DIF, the differential item functioning. This was an effort to examine the exam questions with the intent to eliminate any potential performance disparity in the question development process. And I bring this up because should California wish to continue on exploring innovations in DEI efforts or exam-related efforts, NCBE would need to approve participation. And where NCBE is now, they're striving for uniformity in all aspects of the exam. For example, for the next gen exam, that they are going to be taking over the grading process and the testing accommodations review process. So while exam-related initiatives have not been ruled out by the NCBE, the potential that these innovations will require uniform adoption for all next-gen jurisdictions is likely, given what we know now about the practice that they want to embark on related to uniformity and consistency from one jurisdiction to the next. So these are some of the factors that need to be considered. As for exam content, we noted earlier that we have not determined what the exam content should be in California. However, a critical task for any licensing exam is to define what the definition of minimum competence is, and we have already done that. Both California and NCB have defined their knowledge, skills, and abilities to build this their assessments for minimum competence. We've heard multiple presentations here on how they align and where they differ. What's currently unknown is, again, the content itself for both the next gen and California bar exam. All of that stands to be determined. We know that the next gen knowledge, skills, and abilities are comparable to California's, but they don't fully align. But the question that's come up is, do the differences in these allow us to still achieve our mission? And we know that that is the case. But what we also know is that if California remains with the California-based exam, it'll have ownership of the exam design. And again, this could allow us to prioritize fairness and equity issues in that process. At presentations, we had one recently with I believe in December with a panel of psychometricians that looked at and discussed the performance differences on cognitive tests, because that is what the bar exam is, a cognitive test, and the performance differences for people of color and how it poses a challenge in many fields. It's not limited to the state bar. It happens with cognitive tests in various fields. That bar exam, our bar exam measures knowledge and skills in a way that's cognitively loaded, like needing legal knowledge, writing, research, and investigation as part of that process. So what psychometricians explained to us at one of our meetings is that in order to achieve a valid and defensible assessment, exam design should consider alternatives such as scenario-based assessments, structured interviews or assessments, or performance-based assessments, such as simulations. That exams should make an effort to reduce unrelated cognitive complexity and consider even using multimedia as part of that. The common modalities for licensing exams include performance task simulations. So this leads to the question to this group too, is whether apprenticeship should be part of the licensing process. That is a combination of an exam and task performance a better way of assessing competence while addressing both fairness and equity issues? And so my goal here was to oh, wow, I don't know why they're red in my slide, but the goal here is really to summarize the issues that we provided early on in terms of the guiding questions. And while some of these don't have an answer, there's room for us to discuss and as we make a determination on which path to take. Any questions, comments, concerns? All right. So I think the goal here is to open it up for discussion. When we were planning this session, we sent out a survey about potential topics that people had. I believe these have been covered here today. We'll be also sending out the PowerPoints for reference. So with that, anybody have any thoughts or responses to what you've heard today? Oh, Natalie.
A quick question. Is there any way to get the slides now that we're looking at?
Yeah. Yes, we will do that right now. If Kim, you can do that.
Yes.
All right.
Sending to all the members shortly.
Okay, great.
Amy, I have a question.
Yes.
Just the cost of the exam. So if California court decides to have a California specific exam, we know there's going to be a lot of startup costs for that, that I would not want to have passed on to applicants.
Mhm.
So could it be contemplated in our recommendations that we recommend that the court provide some funding for the startup of this and maybe some ongoing, so that the cost of the exam can be borne by the applicant once it's actually readily built? You had said that the cost of the admissions needs to be kind of borne by the fees, and I just didn't know if that's statutory or if we have some room there to request some funding from the court for that.
Yeah. I think it's feasible to add that as a recommendation. Oh, Leah, do you want to answer that or?
Yeah, I just think, I'm not sure we would request funding from the court, but there could be a loan from the State Bar's General Fund. We would certainly seek philanthropic funding. I think depending on the direction that the Blue Ribbon Commission, ultimately the court wants to take, we may be able to get some actual investment funding, because I do think if we created a really modern sort of gamified exam, we may have investors, because it's a product that could be applicable in many other licensing arenas. So I'm not sure we would seek funding from the court, but we certainly, I don't think would ever look to applicants to fund this. So there'd be a host of other funding sources that we would pursue.
Great, thanks so much.
Amy, this is Josh. I know that you strive to give us the information in a neutral fashion, but I'm just curious, knowing what you know and your experience, especially with the NCBE and the next gen, what are some of the concerns that you have seen or are grappling with regarding the next gen exam?
I think that the one that we're struggling with today is the modality or the determination for us to administer a remote exam. In February, at the end of this month, we'll be conducting our first in-person exam post-pandemic. We know that this has not been an ideal situation for applicants. For example, we normally have about 5,500 applicants sit for the February board exam. We're going to have a very small cohort. We have 4,000, and a lot of it had to do with the concerns with taking an in-person exam. We're restricted to do that because NCBE, for security reasons, would not move to an in-person exam and without an order to a public health order to do that. That limitation has big implications for California and for the students, and it's obvious in the number of people who have applied for this exam. So I think that flexibility, if we were not dependent on, for example, the MBE, we would probably be having a remote exam at the end of the month. So I think that's of concern as we move on, and also participation in the DEI efforts. This MILE has been a great partnership with this research team. It's contributed positively to the students that we are built into our State Bar mission. And so the threat that might go away if it's is of concern as well.
Hi, Amy. Thank you for your presentation today. I'm sorry I missed portions of it, but I have the slides. And in terms of the MILE program, you indicated that there have been opportunities now for 4 bar exams. Have the numbers increased, or what have they been? Have you seen any trends during that 4 exam process?
Do you mean in the number of participants or in the
Yes.
It's varied. We just started doing the February bar exam for the first time in 2021. And so this February will be our second February bar exam. And so obviously the numbers, because we have a smaller cohort, are less in February, but in terms of performance and of the initiative itself, that's been consistent.
It seems like such a worthwhile program to participate in, and so to the extent that we can improve those numbers, I was just wondering if there are any strategies that you guys have employed to do that.
Yes, so we sent out multiple emails to remind folks, and now we've also added the link for that program within the bar exam application, just to increase participation as well.
A quick follow-up question that you were mentioning, the remote administration, the slide indicates that it needs improvement. And I was just wondering if you could elaborate further on that and the steps that can be taken to ensure that that's done.
Yes. So obviously in July 2021, I think everybody knows that we had a challenging time with the exam vendor that we use. And specifically, there was a technical issue that impacted a third of our testing population in a variety of ways. And so California investigated the issue and creating a grading adjustment for those applicants that were impacted. And so exploring and it was related to the 3 softwares that come together in that process. So there's a software that delivers the exam, there's delivers the exam questions, a software that monitors applicants, and the software that sets the profile of the person. So created the baseline and then that checks for the that applicant during the exam. And so that some of that led to the cross of all of that software led to the impact, but the fact that there are no other alternatives that have been explored. So we need the NCBE to basically approve our vendors. At the moment, that is the only vendor that's approved by the NCBE. And so we would like to explore that, and we have been looking at other vendors also to make sure that there's a concern that it's something that can be universally employed. That, for example, that Mac and PCs it's compatible with a variety of operating systems, that you do not require a brand new computer or something that is expensive for applicants to take the bar exam. The other thing is the concern that you need consistent and continuous support on the internet, that you need to stay plugged in so that if somebody's testing and their internet goes out, that they are not impacted. And that's one of the exam features that exists now with our vendor, is that continuous internet is not required. So that is something that we probably want to sustain as we look to a new vendor. The third thing too is the consideration of whether we want to have a live proctor during the process, or the way we have it now, which is a combination. Well, there's no live proctoring, but there's a human proctor that's part of the AI process. And we do the evaluation of whether there's been an exam violation post-exam. And so that means it's a recorded session. So I think that's the other factor. Do we want recorded sessions that we're reviewing, or live proctor as you're going through the process? And some might argue that the live proctor is a better process. For example, we had a lot of applicants who somehow forgot to avoid drinking water or bringing food into the exam. A live proctor could eliminate the need for anything by reminding folks, like they do in person, hey, you can't have water, or you can't bring your sandwich or food into the exam, because these became flags in the remote proctoring process. So I think looking for ways of improving our remote exam modality also includes live proctoring, just for those small reminders that have unintended large consequences on the back end. All right, Leah, you had a question.
Oh, I didn't even know my hand was up, sorry. But I will, I just wanted to get back to Josh's question and just maybe to help, because I think the goal of today's conversation, if I'm correct, is to kind of make a decision regarding the UBE or California specific. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay, so what I just would share with respect to that question is, on the UBE side, or the next gen exam, we have the ability to leverage the talents of an organization that is basically 100% dedicated to exam development. And that, of course, is not the state bar. And I think we would have to sort of be realistic about our current ability and capacity to develop sort of a world-class exam, or a best-in-class exam. And so to me, that is the most compelling reason to go with the NCBE. It's just the level of professionalism, the experience, the fact that they are dedicated to doing this and nothing else. That being said, it does eliminate a lot of our opportunity to be flexible. I think Amy's highlighted some of the issues, but I would step back and take it a bit further and say, if we have any fundamental questions about the nature of the exam itself, certainly with respect to the need, for example, to do more skills testing, the national conference and the next gen exam does not appear to be sort of forward leaning and moving into the direction of a true skills-based interactive exam. And if that's where we want to go, then I think we need to do it ourselves. If we want to consider things like an open book exam, because the practice of law is, of course, in fact, open book, we're not going to be able to do that with the NCBE. So when I think about Josh's question, I think, the benefit is the institutional focus on bar exam development with the national conference. The downsides are many, and they include, this complete lack of flexibility. And the fact that the NCB itself has shown itself to be quite conservative in its approach on a number of issues. So those are my 2 cents on Josh's question.
Emily?
Thank you. So I have 2 questions, and I appreciate Leah's point too, because I think that's kind of where I am as well. It's like, this is their business, and at the same time, it may not have the flexibility we want. So the two questions I guess I have are, one, are we making a recommendation as to the attorney exam as well, in the sense of if we have the, we say, yes, we want a California exam, can we also then make recommendations to say, we don't think that we should have an attorney exam anymore and it should be on motion, or that we should be developing, a California exam that hits both new applicants and attorneys from other states? So that's my first question. And then I guess my second question is there any reason to believe that we need to be offering the bar exam more than twice a year? I know that obviously that would be nice to do, but is that a compelling thing that we're hearing a lot of people really wanting to be able to test more than twice a year?
All right, so I'm going to go to the first question, Emily, and that is, what are the considerations be aside from the exam pathway, which exam, whether whether we need to eliminate, part of that recommendation would be to eliminate the attorney exam. And yesterday we spent some time really addressing some of the, like, for example, design of a non-exam pathway. And we asked Niels for some input on what would be helpful to the court, and the direction that we got was, aside from determining which path we want to take, any more detail would be helpful. So in response to that, I think we could make that part of the recommendation itself. I think the court would be open to receiving more detail on not only the exam, the determination of which exam, but that detail too, what the implication would be for attorney applicants. And now I'm trying to remember your second question, Emily. It was related to
just whether or not we need more than twice a year.
Oh yeah, that in terms of feedback that we get at the Office of Admissions, I think it's just come to be, but I think that if we offered more than twice a year, people would be open to it, especially if it was remote, because that comes up. It makes it more accessible to people, especially if you're waiting, you have a job lined up, there's an opportunity at the end of that, that becomes an issue. So imagine that. The availability of the exam would be a benefit to folks in those scenarios.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, Tracy.
Yes. So I feel like there's so many issues that needed to be decided upon that logically for me, it's almost as though the first step would be California specific versus the NCBE, which for me as a psychometrician, I don't have enough information yet to make that decision. Certainly could be an option, but without a formal audit of their exam, I just don't have the data to support that. While it could be a great option, it's just not there. So for me personally, I can't go that direction. With some of our consumer affair boards, we've been in situations where it takes a number of years, an audit's done, and then our board will say, hey, this is great. It's a fair, valid, and legally defensible exam, but it's not suitable for California, and this is why. Then the association has the option of saying, okay, we can make some changes or negotiate, or as we develop our exam and we get to that point. And we've had that happen with some of our programs, and others it hasn't. So again, it becomes of whether or not they want to work with California's expectations. So then I would go to the next step for me would be, okay, California specific exam. I would be, in my mind, working with subject matter experts saying, what are the critical competencies that need to be measured, and what's the best way to do that? And then looking at, okay, here's the ideal where we want an interactive video situation with lots of bells and whistles that we know financially is not going to work. So then how do we take that apart? Can we take a piece of that and put it back onto the schools or the training programs or on the job training? Or do we just decide it's just not reasonable to assess? But we really focus on that consumer protection, what is most critical. Then how do you do it? How do you measure that so that it's fair? And then we move on from there. And that once we identify what we want to measure and how best to do that, we look at then the modalities. Like for me, when I see remote administration, again, with consumer affairs, most of our programs, if not almost all of them, we don't support that. We're not there yet. I've said it in prior meetings, and I'm very firm about that. I think there are too many inconsistencies in standardization. You lose control of the testing environment. And as we shared before, depending on a person's requirements for different kinds of software, if they have different disabilities or need reasonable accommodation, it can really, really cause a lot of stress and anxiety on the candidates for them additional. I am a huge supporter of computer-based testing, remote test sites. They're all over California. They're all over nationally. They have a standardized system. They have proctors there. They have rooms to address reasonable accommodation. We use it for all of our programs. As you know, with consumer affairs, we have a wide variety of candidate populations, education levels, training, and so forth. It works fabulous. Some programs have continuous testing. Every day a candidate can come in and take an exam. Others do quarterly testing, some every 6 months. So stepping back again, I think really making a decision on which direction to go. And then once that's done, really looking at the competencies and how to test and going from there would be helpful, knowing that if you did go the California specific route, you can always change your mind at some other point. Not saying you want to spend a lot of money to do this and get it going, but it's a cycle of validation where you're always evaluating it. At least with the California specific, it allows you to address a lot of the equity issues and bias. You can run your diff, you can use the mile. There's a lot of things that you can explore. And again, I'm not a fan of a non-exam pathway either, but you could build in a piece of that. So maybe your exam doesn't carry quite the weight that it has in the past. And there's other options that add to the licensure process. So again, my 2 cents, I know it's a lot, sorry, but I just wanted to share my opinion. Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy, that's helpful. Natalie?
As we were, discussing the flexibility that's possibly gained by sticking with the California created exam versus going the UBE route, I think transparency and information is a benefit gained if we stay with a California grown exam. I know that's a challenge, especially for law schools that we're limited to the information the NCBE has been willing to share with the jurisdictions and therefore then to the schools and the applicants. So I'd add that to the category of pluses of creating the exam ourselves.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other thoughts?
Amy, this is Josh. Can we just talk procedurally? Because I think there's a little bit of discomfort around decision-making that I heard today in Tracy's comments and a couple of others. My understanding is that our goal today is to come to some recommendation for the larger committee at this point on which direction we think would be a better direction, one that we want to investigate more, but not that there's finality to it. And so to Tracy's comment about, needing to validate, I mean, we're going to dig into these a little more, but based on the factors we've talked about and they're laid out on this slide, if we think there's a better direction and time will be better spent. Is my understanding accurate?
Yes. So the idea is a decision today would come to the broader group, but with the idea that there's a lot that needs to be fleshed out within, either path and other considerations that need to come together. For example, the non-exam pathway, what their recommendation is, that subcommittee. So that might change a lot of the factors of what the exam, this subcommittee's thinking. So yes, the idea is to bring this to the overall group with more, knowing that there's more work involved in the next steps.
Would it be useful at this point, I know, to hear from different members of this subcommittee on kind of their pros and cons of the two approaches? I think if there are some folks that haven't shared and would like to, I think that's probably most useful for everybody else.
All right, hi, Jeremy.
Thank you, Amy. And Josh, thanks for that clarification. That was really helpful as to process. So I think for me, I definitely, I think I lean towards the California specific bar exam. I feel like a lot of the issues that have been raised can be fixed by having our own bar exam, even though it takes a lot of work on the front end. I think it's going to be better in the long run. So I think that's sort of like one issue. And then as far as, the reciprocity and the other issues that we've talked about, I think it makes it difficult if we have reciprocity, if we're going with a California specific bar exam. I don't know if the two are mutually exclusive, but I think it does maybe makes for some more challenges. But that's sort of where I'm kind of sitting or kind of thinking in terms of the things that have been presented so far. And then on the remote portion, I personally am a big fan of that. I think, I think frankly, giving people choice is important. So if we can make it so that it's easier for folks to take the exam, we can have the technology there, I think that's fantastic. But I think, again, having a choice. Going back to when I took the exam, even a simple choice of you can handwrite the exam or you can take it on your laptop. Something like that I thought was beneficial because some people felt more comfortable doing one or the other. But I think as long as it's safe and secure. So anyways, those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Charles?
Thank you. I, like Jeremy, also, to be upfront, do lean towards a California specific exam. What informs my opinion on that matter is that from everything we've heard from various speakers over the last several months, I don't see a viable path by which California law schools could still implement curricula that are focused on California specific law if we were to adopt the next generation UBE. And I believe that one of the functions of the bar exam is to ensure quality representation and practice by attorneys in their first couple of years. And I think it's crucial that the curriculum that students go through during their time at law school focuses on those in order to assure that during the first several years of practice. That being said, I do have some very pragmatic concerns about the timelines of developing a California specific bar exam. This mirrors what Tracy was saying, though obviously I'm not coming at it from a professional perspective of developing a test. I just have concerns that if there is a gap between the timeline it takes to develop a California specific exam and the timeline during which the NCB is willing to make available to us the MBE, that there could be a stopgap period where we don't have a proper bar exam ready to be offered. I raised a concern in the email that I sent regarding this session, that if there's the possibility for some short-term utilization, some short-term contract with NCB as a stopgap measure to continue use either of the MBE or even the UBE as a temporary stopgap measure, that could be a potential way of addressing the issue. But I just, to mirror concerns that Leah was saying earlier, the state bar is not like the NCBE a organization purely dedicated to the creation of exams. So to really feel comfortable with voting for a California specific exam, I would like to get at least some more concrete information on the timeline that it would realistically take to develop such an exam. Though that being said, one of the main sources that would be able to provide us insight on that timeline would probably be the NCBE, who has a vested interest in their exam being adopted, to be frank. But that being said, those concerns are more than counterbalanced by me, in my mind, by the desire to see a California-specific exam that maintains focus on California-specific law and therefore ensures that law schools still focus on that while they're training new attorneys.
Thanks, Charles. And that is something that we'd have to work on. I mean, right now, NCBE, the Next Gen exam, has a website with a timeline that it's clearly they've already embarked on the design efforts. California would have to probably do the same form of planning, and the determination of how long that could take also is unknown at this moment. So yeah, valid points. Thank you, Charles. Okay. All right. What about if we hear
Amy,
anybody?
you had a couple more questions. David and
Okay.
Emily, I think, both had their hands up.
All right, thank you. Hi, David.
Did you call on me, Amy?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, just a few points, many of which, probably all of which have been covered at one point or another, but just some clarification on a few points. Obviously, the Next Gen is going, just like the UBE now, will be the device that would allow score portability. So I would hope everyone would consider the impact that score portability would have on California's new graduates and enable them to be admitted immediately into other jurisdictions, which I don't think would be possible with a California specific exam. There was some comment about skills, but I hope everybody understands, and I think you do, that the Next Gen bar exam is going to have a very heavy emphasis on skills. And that's one of the reasons for the Next Gen is to move the content to some extent to skills-based testing. And just a word on remote testing, and I appreciated Tracy's remarks, and I tend to agree with her about the difficulties with remote testing. There is a fundamental fairness issue there in terms of, as she's explained, in terms of the lack of uniformity in the testing environment. And also the difficulty in monitoring for cheating. And it's not just to have a live proctor in order to sort of police the food and beverage coming in. It's fundamental issues of copying and the like that are much more easily detected with live proctoring than with the post-examination proctoring. And the absence of that fundamental fairness is a key issue as to the fundamental validity of the examination. So if a primary reason for a California specific exam is, the ability to do remote testing, just please keep in mind that, and I applaud you for the idea of collecting more information and moving slowly and determining what is, practical and reasonable. But keep in mind that there's a lot to be done with the technology in order to allow remote to really be fair and equitable. And the same would be open book, but I won't go there. But I do appreciate the opportunity to make those comments.
Thank you, David. I think Emily. Oh, yeah.
Amy, it may be helpful. I know you mentioned at one point, I've heard you talk about portability and the timeframe in which attorneys in California historically have looked for reciprocity. And obviously portability has a short period of time. Can you address that? Because I think it would be at least educational to David's comment.
Oh, yes. So the maximum age of transferred score. So those that are able to port their score, there's a maximum age of that score, and it varies from one jurisdiction to the next. The smallest being 25 months, and the largest being up to 5 years. The most common policy, and I think it's about 20 jurisdictions, I believe, is 36 months or 3 years, that your score has to have been valid within the last 3 years. And so, or it has to have been at least 3 years since you took that exam, I should say. And so that is the policy under the score portability policy, most common in the jurisdictions.
I don't know on portability exactly how much that would affect folks, but I think just anecdotally, you have to keep in mind at what point in someone's career will they know what additional states they would want to be practicing in where they could use that portability.
Well, and portability is a bigger issue now, given that a pandemic and post-pandemic courts are allowing more online, or using remote technology for operations in general. And so I think we've seen more of a request now than we have in the past because it's related to the ability to appear remotely. All right, Karen, I think you have your hands up. Karen? Karen?
Amy, I think she
Yes,
had.
yes, I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, there's construction down the street has cut my technology connections. But so just real quickly to follow up on what Josh was saying, is there any data on when in people's careers they seek to transfer or add jurisdictions? Do we know if that is that it's as distributed, before the 36 months or after the 36 months is my first question. And then I'll answer offline, it's fine. Second point, on the technology, this is another area where I think given the time it would take to design the exam, there would be time to do a more thorough job and opportunity to solicit development that would help us secure a remote option. And I do think it would need to remain an option to solve some of the access issues. But this is an area where there are opportunities to develop solutions, particularly if they are specific to the state and not required to be, nationally or globally applicable. And so I very much credit the concerns and the complexity of the technology questions, but I also just want us to think broadly about the opportunities to develop solutions or commission solutions that are fit for purpose in this state, designed for the kinds of conditions and results that we want to achieve. And that was certainly not the case with some of the tools that I think were being used in that earlier round, which were much more sort of generic, for lack of a better word.
Mm-hmm. Yes, okay. So Karen, I want to go back to your first question, and that is, what do we know about the career changes, or at what point it happens in a career, in somebody's law career, that they might want to choose to go to another jurisdiction? And we don't have that data. I mean, I think anything that we would have would be anecdotal, in the sense that, what I imagine that potential data could be the requests that we get for to share their MPRE score, whatever the case might be. And so I think that we don't have that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and thank you for your comments on the remote exam considerations as well, and the technology issues. David.
Yeah, just one data point, and I'm not sure of this, but if it's helpful at all, I believe there have been nationwide 35 or 40,000 scores transferred over time. I don't know if that informs very much about California, but it's a data point.
Thank you. Tracy?
Yes, I just wanted to add on remote administration that they are continuing to improve on it. So when I say that I'm not a big supporter of it at this time, we are monitoring it, and we're actually working with a particular vendor as they move away from the traditional artificial intelligence and look at other things. So I definitely think in the future, we will see more of this, for example, our consumer affair programs. So now I'm not a supporter, but like everything else, technology is improving, and this is very exciting, and folks are really digging into it. So it somewhere down the road may address those uniformity, consistency, and standardization issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. All right, Emily.
So I guess I'm keying in on what Leah said about opportunity here. And, you know, I've worked with the state bar for, I guess, almost 20 years in various capacities. And there's been some ups and downs with the state bar. I feel that we're really at an up point. And so I have a lot of, I can see the vision with this, but I want to make sure that we're comfortable entering into a 5-year, 4-year, 5-year project where we would be building, obviously contracting and working with somebody that would do the building, but that we're comfortable, that we're in a position, when I say we, I mean the state bar is in a position to take on something like this. And that this is, I mean, again, I think you all are, and I think we are, but I wanted to raise that because I know that is something that will be raised by other people to say, look, you have a perfectly good exam that allows everybody to go any state they want to. Why don't you just do that? So I just wanted to raise that and see if there's any thoughts from anybody else about sort of that aspect. Like, I want us, if we're going to do this, I want us to have the best exam in the world. So is that something that we can go kind of move forward with?
Maybe that's a question for me. I think the answer is yes. And, you know, I don't want to minimize the work involved and the time. I think the NCBE's timeline is 5 years, right? And so I wouldn't expect that it would take us any less time. And it will be important for us to secure the funding that we talked about to build that best-in-class exam. And I don't see the state bar doing that itself. As you mentioned, we would contract that out. There would have to be a work group of some sort that included folks like yourselves and really experts in exam development to oversee the work of that contractor, and we would move forward in that way. But I think fundamentally the answer is yes.
Thanks.
Amy, this is Josh again. Folks, as the vice chair and I became a member of this subcommittee and the other one, and I try not to share my thoughts too much during it because I'm not actually a voting member of the subcommittee, but I feel like I have a little bit of experience here under fire with Amy when we had to turn to a remote exam very quickly in the beginning of the pandemic. And I was a true believer, and still am, in the future of having a online and remote possibilities. I think that is where the future will be. And I was sad to see that the next gen is looking towards that direction. But I don't think we should lose sight of how difficult that is. And I think David made those comments earlier. That is a tremendous feat, having watched the exam over the last year and a half. The technology is not there yet. Again, so set aside open book for a moment. And I don't think it's going to be there for a while. So I do think that there's a lot of other advantages, including equity and inclusion and control of content. It's California based and others, but the remote portion, it will take work and it will take time.
Thanks, Josh.
Amy, I guess at this point, the question is there more conversation around this topic, or are we at a point internally in this subcommittee where someone wants to make a motion in one direction or another? We can continue on as long as we have set aside. If we feel like we've discussed these issues, we could definitely also move on and have the next discussion at the full committee level.
Yes. So if anybody has a motion to entertain, this is the time to bring that. Otherwise, if there are questions or thoughts, this is the time to share before a determination is made. This poll of what direction people want to take. And the question at hand is really about which exam is more appropriate. Tracy, you have your hand raised.
I was going to make a motion. Are we ready for that?
Yes, I think so.
I make a motion that this committee put forth using a California specific exam, exploring reciprocity, portability, as well as the various issues and considerations that have been discussed today and listed on this slide. And at the same time, recognizing that we continue to monitor the development of the next gen exam.
Second.
Tracy, can you repeat the first part of that, please?
I'll try if I remember. I make a motion that this committee pursue use of the California specific examination and explore the considerations and issues discussed in the committee today and on this slide, while at the same time monitoring the development of the next gen exam.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Amy, I think you have a number of questions.
Okay.
Comments.
All right. Natalie?
Just a friendly amendment to that motion to include and consider the CAPA recommendations as part of that California specific exam.
Okay. All right.
Just Amy, real quick, Tracy, do you accept that friendly motion, amendment to the motion?
Yes, I do.
Okay. All right. Sorry, I'm doing too many things at once. Neil.
Amy, really quick, can you repeat what that friendly amendment was, please?
Sure. It was the addition was to include CAPA recommendations in that California specific exam. But do you want to hear the whole thing?
No, that's okay. Just
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Sure. All right, Neil.
I'm not going to actually suggest that I actually do an amendment. I'm just a liaison. I just want to throw out the idea of adding something to the statement that says that, I guess maybe building on the word explore, Tracy, that you used. about maybe collecting data by doing special sessions. There's been some talk about doing special sessions on open book versus in person. Open book versus closed book, in person versus remote, just to throw that concept in there into the mix as well.
I like it. It's more active than passive.
Mhm.
This is Karen. Should we also add some acknowledgement that we haven't yet received recommendations from the other subcommittee and so that this is not an exclusive pathway unless and until we decide that it is?
That's a good question. So, and maybe the group, if we want to modify that, amend the motion, does anybody want to speak to that aspect? Is the idea that the exam pathway is a sole pathway, or is the group open to a non-exam pathway alternative as well?
Am I correct that we're just making this recommendation to the full committee?
Yes.
Yes, that's correct.
So I guess I would hold off on that issue as it relates to the other side until we hear what that is. I don't want to say the other side, but the non-exam.
Okay. All right. I want to go back. Neil, can you repeat the additions that you had pointed out? I remember it was related to modality or open book. Sorry, can you say that again?
I think maybe like explore through and collect data through special sessions.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I don't think we need to actually identify remote versus in person, open book versus closed book.
Got it. All right.
Amy, are you comfortable that you have captured the motion?
I think so. I'm going to put it on the screen. And have Tracy look at it and weigh in on it, given that she made that motion. So give me 1 second. All right. Just put it in there. All right, here we go. So the motion was as follows: pursue the use of a California specific exam and explore issues related to reciprocity and portability while continuing to monitor the next gen exam, including, well, I guess it's ensuring that the California specific exam includes CAPA recommendations and use of data collection to monitor the exam itself, right? There's a lot of concepts. Give me 1 second to clean this up. Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm looking for one clarification on Neil's comments. Was the data collection to monitor the exam? That's not how I understood it.
How about, Amy, how about to get Niels in here, how about pursue use of California specific exam by exploring issues and collecting data. Exploring issues and collecting data related to considerations such as reciprocity and portability. Wait, reciprocity, comma, portability, and CAPA recommendations while continuing to monitor the validation of the next gen exam.
Okay.
Does
And-
that look,
A
everyone?
little more specific, collecting data through special sessions.
Yes.
Through special testing sessions.
Okay. Related to considerations such as CAPA recommendations, while continuing to monitor next gen exam for, you said,
I said monitor the validation of the next gen exam.
okay, there we go.
Can I ask, on the CAPA recommendations, we wouldn't necessarily be doing special testing sessions for that.
Yeah.
So I would maybe
Yeah,
say
if-
pursue use of California specific exam with CAPA recommendations.
Do you mean reflect, maybe like reflecting CAPA recommendations?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. Okay. Take out this portability.
But the special sessions, I think that Neil is referring to, are those considerations were not reciprocity and portability.
Yeah, unless you want to add to that list and just say reciprocity, portability, open book, closed book, remote, in person. I don't know if you just want to add the list.
How about
I
special?
don't know how we would actually collect data about reciprocity and portability through special sessions, but
We could
Maybe
collect-
just take them out since they're considerations already.
But we wouldn't collect data on reciprocity and portability through special sessions. I think, Neil, you're really referring to the special sessions to test various exam modalities. Is it mostly around exam administration modalities? Like open book, remote, live proctored,
yeah,
not?
I think so. Unless, of course, folks on this subcommittee have other ideas to add to that list. I mean, in some way, our productive mindset is also kind of a tweak on a special session for DEI issues, right?
Kind of, except now it's been institutionalized, right? We
Right.
put the funding into the base and it's happening every time.
So could we, right before the word consideration, put related to exam administration considerations, or, and then instead of saying such as, just take such as out?
Okay. Collecting data through special. But we want to say something about reciprocity and portability, like factoring reciprocity and portability.
Well, you could also say by exploring issues relating, well,
I don't know if
Never
you
mind.
do EGs in your motions, but you could put pursue use of California specific exams reflecting CAPA recommendations, strike that and by exploring issues, e.g. reciprocity, portability, and collecting data through special sessions related to exam administration considerations while continuing to monitor the validation of the next gen exam.
Okay. E.g.
What I was trying to get to with issues was the long list that we just kind of have spent time discussing.
You want to pull reciprocity and portability up after the EG.
Yeah. And I thought it was, okay. Got it.
No.
E.g. Reciprocity and portability.
And collecting data through special sessions.
And then while continuing to monitor the validation of the next gen exam.
I think you, okay, yeah.
All right, how does that look to everyone? Tracy?
It looks good to me. I defer to the others for their amendments and feedback.
Amy, this is Josh. I think it would be clearer if you put the, for example, reciprocity portability in a parenthetical, and then I think it would work.
Okay.
And I would just, this is really nitpicky, but I would just take the ampersand out and use the word and.
Okay. All right.
Then Amy, one last one. I would just put a between of and California.
Okay.
It's always great doing with a bunch of lawyers.
Hey, you know what I mean?
All right. All right, so I'll repeat it, and this is a motion that Tracy has is putting on the table. Pursue use of a California specific exam reflecting CAPA recommendations by exploring issues, for example, reciprocity, portability, and collecting data through special sessions related to exam administration considerations, while continuing to monitor the validation of the next gen exam. Natalie, you're
I'm so sorry. Do we need to say that this motion does not in any way reflect an opinion on what is happening on the non-exam pathway? In other words, we're not saying that this is our recommendation to only go the exam pathway route. Right, because we're not saying that. This is just, we're saying between the two, we're going the California versus UBE for the exam pathway.
I think just to clarify the process, which was alluded to earlier, the motion here today would then be presented to the larger group, and then you'll have an opportunity to hear what they have recommended or are recommending you consider. And so the two will work together. I don't think that this forecloses in any way a non-exam alternative, but so I don't think it's necessary, but if you wanted to make it clear, that would be okay too. So this is just intended to answer the question of whether we pursue a California specific approach or next gen, to hear from the other group as to what they're recommending, and then to discuss as a full group how the two might work together.
Okay, if the question is that specific, then I think it's fine as is.
okay. All right, so do we have a second on this motion?
Second.
Okay, so Kim, would you like to, can you take roll?
Yes, but seconded by Mr. Evans. Is that
Yes,
correct?
thanks, Kim.
You're welcome. Mr. Boyd?
Well, although I certainly endorse some of the themes in the motion, and particularly with respect to continuing to monitor the content and format and delivery of the next gen exam, I'm a respectful no on the motion as a whole.
Thank you. Mr. Chen?
My answer is yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Harrison?
Yes.
Ms. Montes?
Yes.
Ms. Rodriguez?
Yes.
Ms. Quevedo?
Yes.
Ms. Silverman?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we do have additional time, but it's not necessary that we utilize it now, I suppose. I'd be open to your thoughts as to whether you'd like to proceed with or have any additional questions that you'd like to discuss at the subcommittee before reconvening. The next meeting would be on March 2nd with the entire group.
I'm good with breaking, Justice Guerrero, but that's just me.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the response. Well, I think maybe this will give us good information to then reconvene and present. We'll give some thought as to what would be the best method to present our recommendation to the entire committee or the commission. And then I think you guys will enjoy also hearing from the other subcommittee as well. And it'll be good to meet as a group again on March 2nd. So it doesn't appear that there's any additional business, but I will ask if anyone has any additional business to please let me know. Okay. So there is no additional business. Before adjourning the meeting today, though, I wanted to thank Josh for chairing it and also Amy for all your work in preparation for today, as well as everybody who was involved and for all of your participation. Thank you, and we'll see you on March 2nd, and the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.